Hey everyone, I want to get this out there. It's something I'm very passionate about, something I've been thinking about for a really long time, and that is transformation, human transformation, positive development and growth, not just any transformation, right? Because we can identify transformation as anyone doing anything that's changing them from one state into another state, right? So I think it's important to add the caveat that this is about positive human transformation. I see Gloff, you're on. Hey man, how you doing? It's been a while. I hope you got through tax season okay. Yeah, the power of transformation, caterpillar to the butterfly. That's what you just wrote there. Exactly. So the point of all this is that regardless of whether we're transforming in a positive direction or a direction we don't want to transform in, we're always transforming. We're always changing states of consciousness and being. We're always shifting from one place to another in life. We're never in a stagnant state for too long. But this is really about what does it mean to take transformation into a positive direction. And the first distinction that I want to draw here is that there's a couple different levels that I'm thinking about in my self inquiry. And one is states of being, and the other is states of doing or processes of doing. When we're looking to transform or accomplish anything in our life, we're really looking to change the way we feel. So we could say, I want to get to the gym more and more because I want to reach my goal of being stronger and more fit and liking the way I feel and look, right? So that's a surface level want. But if we just peel back a little deeper than that, I think what we find is what we really want is to change the way we feel. Why do I want to go to the gym? Oh, because I want to look better. Why do I want to look better? Because I want to feel better. Because I want to feel different. So when we look at any goal that we set, whether it's making more money or being more active in the gym or having better personal relationships, we're really looking at wanting to change the way we feel at the bottom, right? All the other outcomes are kind of the surface level, trying to achieve something, trying to change things in the way that we look and the way that we're presented to the world. That's all through the level of action. And so if we look at transformation as a vertical pillar, and we see being is the deep sense of changing the way that we're being and feeling, and then we say doing is that's the more ascendant function. It's more of a higher, it's not quite as deep. It's more on that surface level. And what we really want, again, is to change the way we feel. Dust to Dust just wrote in asking, what does the fox mask say? The fox mask doesn't say anything. My girlfriend made that. She's an artist and she enjoys pottery and stuff like that, and sculpting and painting. But so if we know that really what we're looking for is to change the way we feel, then we have to ask, well, how do we change the way we feel? And typically, it seems to me that we do that through actions, taking different actions that are intended to get us to that deeper feeling. But the weird thing is that oftentimes we don't even realize that what we're actually going for is changing the way we feel. Like we don't even process that, it seems. It seems that we just think that we want to go to the gym for that surface level reason, and we never take it all the way to the bottom. And in my experience and what I'm wrestling with in my studying and in my contemplation and my learning and growing right now is really taking in the fact that we really want to change something on a much deeper level when we're looking for any change in life. And so a question that we might ask is, well, then why do we accept the surface level explanation of I want to go to the gym because I want to look better or feel stronger? Is it ever really that simple when we want to change something in our lives? Because to me, it seems like it's never that simple when we look under the surface. Rico Starr says, yeah, the emotion gives us meaning. Yeah, exactly. We're really, like Peterson says all the time, what we're really looking for is meaning. What we're really looking for is to feel meaningfully engaged. That's one of the most brilliant things the guy says, in my opinion, is to live in that razor's edge or on that razor's edge of meaningful engagement where you're balancing the chaos and the order. So any of the surface level goals we have, I think we're really going for this sense of purpose, engagement, meaning in our lives. or what Dr. Strachan's been calling soul directed. So again, let's just look at these two polarities. There's the being states and there's the doing states. And oftentimes we elevate the doing states and we forget about the being states. If only I could achieve all these things, all these different goals, and I did them. I cleaned my house up right. I got to the gym on time. I made this much money. I, did this in my personal relationships, whatever it would be. Then we tend to elevate that as the be all end all and forget about the state of being. And I think if we can bring back those being states as an essential part of the transformative process, we're completing the whole picture, because they're both important, right? Like, we have to act in the world as people. We have bodies. We have the capacity to, be in this landscape of potential actions that we can play with and experiment with. And that's an important expression that we're always going to have to interface with. And if we can do that with also a sense of what is the state of being that I'm looking to generate, how do I feel? What is the way that I want to feel? And in some of the training that I've had, this has been identified as the deeper need, right? So the surface level need is the want. Like, I want this. I want to be more successful in my career. That's the surface level. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly reasonable, good thing to want. The deeper need is, what is the actual feeling that I'm going to get out of doing that? That's what I really want. That's what I really need. Someone, Rico Starr, writes, the problem is that people set goals in order to be happy in the future instead of having those feelings of happiness in the present. Yeah, I think you're onto something there. There's a real problem in putting out these provisions of, I'll feel better when. I'll feel better when I get this. I'll feel better when I do that. Now, happiness is a tricky one, though, because I think that Peterson is onto something when he says being meaningfully engaged is more important than happiness. I think he's onto something there, because happiness, it seems that we have less control over that state of consciousness, but that we can always somehow feel this sense of meaningful engagement. It's a matter of choice in the moment, of being on that razor's edge of chaos and order, of choosing that life is meaningful. Like Mercury's been saying on this channel, choosing that, he says, God is good and life is meaningful. That's a choice we can all make for ourselves. But I do think that there is something important in what you're saying, Rico. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I have no idea. It could be Reco. But that's exactly what I'm pointing to, is that we're putting out these action states and saying the process of accomplishing something physically is more important than the process of embodying something energetically. And we've always done that in the West, really. That's a Western thing. I mean, if you look at Eastern philosophy and tradition, they tend more towards the states of being than doing. And I'm not saying that one's better than the other. I'm just simply pointing out a distinction. So if we realize that distinction, I think we can level with ourselves and say, okay, so we owe it to ourselves as human beings, who a lot of us are seeking positive transformation in our lives, to understand that what we're looking for is to change our states of being. So just to recap, being is how we want to feel. Doing is how we perceive we can get to that feeling. Doing is a procedure of actions. Doing leads to being, and being leads to doing. So it's a cyclical thing. It's not, so you could be a certain way and that would lead to certain actions, or you could do a certain set of actions and that would lead to a state of being. So I think either way that you tackle it, right? If I say, I'm going to focus on my feeling of confidence this week, or I'm going to focus on really embracing that source of energy. I'm going to tell myself affirmations. I'm going to do all these new age techniques. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to do this and that. I do know that would change the way I act. That would change the way I interface with the world. I might be more productive in certain areas. I might be more mindful in my relationships. Okay. Or we could do the inverse. We could say, I'm really going to focus on acting. I'm going to hit the schedule. I'm going to go to the gym this many times. And then that would change my sense of being. So either way you tackle it, you're getting to that whole picture. And it kind of reminds me of what I was saying at the beginning. Transformation is a constant. A lot of times we think of the word transformation, personal transformation, and we think it's like this thing that's reserved for those who are really focused on changing their lives in a positive way. But that's only one type of transformation. If I was just to not give my life any more thought or contemplation and just to simply sit with what is, I would change automatically. Just like the seasons change. The seasons don't try to change, they just change. There's no author of making that change every at the transition from season to season. It just is. It just happens. So if we know that transformation is inevitable. But do we want to co-opt with that process? In other words, do I want to have a say in how my life is lived? Or do I want to simply just allow what happens to happen and to kind of ride that deterministic train all the way home? And I tend to be more a proponent of the bringing more consciousness, effort, and meaningful orientation to life. And so that means to ask myself the hard questions of how am I living? How does that sit with me? Am I on track? What am I doing? Like Peterson says often, what am I doing that's horribly wrong that I could stop doing, or that I know that would be beneficial if I started doing? But then I could take it even deeper than that. And this is where I think most of us don't tread, specifically in the West. And I could take it to, well, what are my states of being? How do I feel in my life? Because so often we get trapped in this notion of accomplishment and comparison and status. How do I really feel about myself? Not just about myself, but what's my experience of life? When I really get to the bottom of it for myself, and I think of how I want to feel, I see this image of my potential. I could call it my higher self. And there's light. It's like a field of golden light, and I'm standing in the center of it. And I have this other image of the soul tree, which was the name of my other YouTube channel before I moved over to this one. And that image for me represents my potential. That's an image that I aspire to, that I aspire to live into. And when I actually feel that image, that to me, I feel deeply connected to it. And there's no logic in it. It's just that you could call it a totem. You could call it part of the map of my meaning in life. And if I tune into that sense of potential, I actually get a feeling inside, like in my inner compass, deep in my core, in my guts. And that's what I'm trying to get to here, that deeper sense of connection. What if I acted from that place? What would happen in my life? What's possible? How far could I go? What could be accomplished? What states of being could I really tune into? How many people could I benefit? Dust to Dust says, not familiar with the concept of the soul tree. Yeah, well, that's just my image. So I'll tell you the story. And Rico Star says, feels quite divine. Love it. Awesome. I'm glad you like it. So one day I was feeling super depressed. This was about 4.5 years ago. And this had been after about a 2-week period of depression. And I was super down in the dumps. I was like desperate, and out of desperation, I got in my car and I drove to a trail because I love nature. Nature is a place where I can feel at peace and I can feel a sense of meaning. And I walked out to this pond at the end of the trail, and there was this little dock that went out into the pond, and I just sat out on the dock and I just desperately in tears said, "Help me. Like something, just give me something." And I opened my eyes and I looked behind me and I just saw this image of this big tree. And it wasn't there physically. It was there more like a visualization, like an imaginal tree right in front of me. And it was there, but it wasn't. I don't know if that makes sense. I could feel it, I could see it, but I knew it wasn't physical. And it had this like purple gold aura around it. And it basically told me through this weird communication that wasn't totally verbal that like you'll find your source of connection here. And so I started communicating with that image in my imagination as an exercise. And I did it over and over and over again until I eventually started feeling this deep sense of guidance and connection within my soul. And since that point, actually, I haven't had that long of a depression. Like I talked to you guys yesterday, and said the longest cycle of depression I'll have now is about 24 hours. So yeah, I just can't believe I can't believe how that image has imbued my life with meaning and life force and a sense of spiritual connection. And I don't have a scientific way of explaining it to you. I just know that that's my tree. That's my potential. And I'm sure you all have something like that for yourself, even if you don't know about it. Even if you're not aware of it, there's that image of your true self, your highest self. It's like it is you, but it's beyond you at the same time. And to me, that's the beauty of transformation. That's the beauty of living into our potential. Got a couple comments here. Muhammad says, this guy is onto something. Thank you. I appreciate that. Andrew says, if you're enjoying the video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. Thanks, Andrew. It's great to see you here, man. Trees have a lot of meaning, Dust to Dust says, through their own structure. Yeah, trees have a lot of meaning to me because, well, there's the descending and the ascending at the same time. And then there's the horizontal expansion. So it's literally expanding into all dimensions at once. And so there's a lot of meaning to that for me. And actually, I could close my eyes, and one of the exercises I started doing was becoming one with the tree and actually imagining myself rooting down, going up and going out. And it's a really useful exercise. And it might sound strange at first, but I really have, if I go to that tree, I'll get answers to questions that I haven't been able to get in my life. If I'm dealing with a problem, or if I don't know what choice to make, or if I need guidance for the day that I'm having, if I really go to that place and trust it, it always comes through for me in one way or the other. And this is kind of a somatic body-mind transformation experience, right? It's not super logistical. And so Muhammad says, that sounds like someone explaining a mushroom trip. That's so interesting that you say that, because one of the things about my mind is I've always been super imaginative, and I've never done psychedelics. I've done other stuff, and I'm sober now. And I've told that story before on this podcast about how I struggled with alcoholism and addiction as an adolescent, and I got a lot of trouble. And now I'm at the point in my life where I've been sober for over 8 years, and I'm on the right path for myself. And I never tell anyone else that they should be sober, because I just know that it's so unique to each individual. Like everybody has their own relationship to substances, and it's unique to them. And there's no universal law, in my opinion. I have a lot of great friends who manage it just fine. But yeah, there is this psychedelic experience in spirituality or meaningful connection or whatever you want to call it that I've had in my life. And so I think Andrew, who's here, can relate too. Like, he's super open and creative as well. And if you saw his Out of Body Experience podcast he did with us the other day, he has these experiences. And I think certain people are more prone to have the visual type. Certain people are more prone to have the more auditory or the more sensory, depending on your own proclivity. Dust to Dust says, also, look at the way the branches support each other all the way to the leaves. Reminds me of the Holy Spirit. Yeah, there's just so many symbols in the tree. I mean, that's why the tree of life is such a powerful image that has been passed throughout generations. And there's so much to it. I mean, if you look at Jewish mysticism, they have a tree. I forget what it's called. There's the Kabbalah. I don't know. I'm not very well versed in that, but there's this really interesting symbolism for them too. I love how trees have branches that feel like the nerve endings, and you try to connect the dots. Yeah, Rico said that exactly. So one of the things about transformation, and this is the next part of what I'm trying to say here, is the image. And Peterson talks about your potential all the time, the image of your true self, and it's out in the future almost as this loose image of potential and beauty and light and power. And for me, that really comes through the tree. And oftentimes when I work with people, I encourage them to find what their image is, right? And it might change. Like your image next year might be different than the image that was good for you this year. For me, the tree's been fairly constant and feels like something I can always lean back on, like a main source of connection. But I've also had other images, like a wolf was one that was coming to my dreams. And the wolf is an image that also had tremendous amount of meaning for me, that I connected to, that felt like something that was leading me into another realm of transformation. And the wolf, one of the things that came to me with the wolf was teaching me how to be more subtle, teaching me how to follow what I've been calling the more intuitive path of life, to use my nose to follow the tracks, to pick up a scent. So it's more living life from this place of feeling and connection rather than from logic, which I'm also used to using to get me through life. So images are extremely powerful ways of asking the question, where am I headed? Where do I want to head? And how can I get there? And the image helps us fill the gap. It helps us get to the deeper energy structure needed to embody the next level of potential in our life. So we've got a few comments here. I love how I read that one. Never sacrifice who you could be to who you are right now. Jordan Peterson quote that Muhammad posted. That's a great quote. Nice. My friend loves wolves. And Gloff, Rico says, and Gloff says, Ryan, you should talk to Jay Dyer. Yeah, go ahead and connect us. I'm not familiar with that person, but I would love to connect with anybody who's well versed in these areas. Matthew Hill says it's know of the tree of Sephiroth. Are you talking about the tree of Sephiroth? In what tradition? Can you give me a little context? That's interesting. And Gloff says just about esoteric stuff. I just recently ordered his book, Esoteric Hollywood 2. Cool. Right on. Okay, so Matthew Hill's talking about the tree from the Kabbalah. Yeah, I love that image in the Kabbalah of that tree. I love a lot of the mystic traditions of religions that where you really get this sense of connection in a deeper way than you do in the more fundamentalist region of the religion, like in in Sufism and mysticism in Judaism or Christianity or the Hindu traditions. Or Buddhist traditions. There's just so many rich. There's thousands of years of knowledge of how to work with imagery, right? And science is starting to catch up now. Like one of the things neuroscience is starting to catch up on is realizing how powerful the occipital lobe is in our brains, which is responsible for imagery, and also how images do in fact have a lot to do with changing and transforming. And forming that image actually helps us make new synaptic connections in our brain that helps us to make that Piagetian cognitive leap from one stage to the next. But not just cognitive is what I'm trying to say, like literally changing the fabric of our connected tissue of life, like what gives us meaning, what sustains us. And one thing that Peterson said is that we're all an epicenter, or we're all at the center of we're a node in a network. We're all at the center of like this this beautiful network, and in some ways we're all at the center of our own universe, although we share a larger picture together with many different centers. And it reminds me of this kind of picture of sacred geometry where circles are looping together and going out and out and out into concentric rings. But if I, as a node in a network, if I fulfill my imagistic potential, if I really see like who could I be, and I connect with that self, I talk to that self, I ask it what it wants from me, I trust my imagination. Like, the imagination gets such a bad rep in our culture because we view it as not real or less real. But we could also just as easily view it as meta real or more real than anything else, because it's really a part of everything that we do. We're always using the faculty of imagination in one way or the other. So people often ask, well, how do I know it's not just my imagination? And my answer is, so what? What's your point? It doesn't matter if it's just your imagination. The imagination is a beautiful part of life. And now the deeper question is this something that stands on its own, this tree or this experience? Or am I just projecting a creative exercise onto my life in order to feel better? That's a good question. And I think it's both, personally. Because I do think that the sense of image or potential that we're communicating with is real. And at the same time, I think that we are projecting some image onto it. And there is a little bit of there's a little bit of a personal aspect to it that's not as universal. And there's a universal aspect to it. So we've got Matthew Hill coming on. Grim is here. So I'm going to read a few comments here. Grim says, Matthew Hill, I remember discovering Sephiroth wasn't just a Final Fantasy villain. Muhammad says, guys, it's Kabbalah. Laughing. Thank you for that. In Norse, Matthew Hill says, in Norse mythology, it's known as the tree. Yes, and the tree Yggdrasil. I don't know how to pronounce that, but yeah, trees everywhere, man. Norse mythology is brilliant and absolutely fascinating. Oh my God, I played the video game God of War. Such a good game. I played that game. That's the cool thing about video games that I think is underrated, is if you can actually connect with the images in the game, you can have a real experience with those images as like a mindfulness practice. Obviously, video games are a controversial subject, but I think that if they're used in the right way, it could be another way to exercise the imagination in a powerful way. People call it as the axis mundi, says Matthew Hill. Yeah. Carl Jung talked about the axis mundi or the world tree a lot. Griswold Grimm, he says, it reminded me of your right hemisphere, the right brain hemisphere. Yeah, that's the hemisphere responsible for imagery. The right hemisphere brings us into that imagistic state. And again, let's go back to Peterson here, because I like talking about his work on this channel as much as possible. He says the right brain is specialized for navigating unknown territory, and the left brain is specialized for navigating known territory. The left brain is more verbal, it's more literal, it's more organizational, it's more linear. The right brain is more creative, it's more intuitive, it's more feminine, it's all these different things. And yes, one of the critiques you could make against Western civilization is it doesn't develop the right brain function enough, or it doesn't support that in the school systems. And there's a lot of great things about Western civilization, but I think it's fair to point out areas where we could improve, right? So I think that's an area we could all improve. That's an area in my life that I'm working to balance. So now we've got another great comment here. Rico Starr says, I found symbolism that have powerful teachings in them, and I have found myself learning and feeling them myself, and has been very fruitful as compared to solely reading knowledge. Again, yeah, that's perfect comment. Such a beautiful comment. States of being versus states of action, states of doing. These are totally different things. So reading a book and getting knowledge, you're doing something, you're thinking about something, but are you integrating that into your being? Are you having an experience? Just like Peterson says, earn your knowledge. because there's knowing something and then there's knowing something. Like you've had that experience, you've felt it in your bones, you actually have something to say about it. Sometimes, Rico says, sometimes these symbolisms are so pure and powerful when understood that it's better to keep private. That's another good point that I'll get to in a second. Dust to Dust says, you sound like Christopher Lungen talking about nodes of consciousness. He describes reality as a mind, mass as the storage of memory, and inertia as cognition. I'm going to look that up. That sounds absolutely brilliant, and I would love to learn more about that. So yes, sometimes certain experiences are so special and sacred that they're better to keep private. I absolutely agree with that. One of the reasons for that is because sometimes when we share something with someone who won't understand it, it loses its power. So I'll give you an example. I went on a vision quest 5 years ago. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Vision quest, you go out in the wilderness. I use water. You fast for 4 days, 4 nights, 3 days, 3 nights, depending on the quest that you're on. Alone in the wilderness. You have other people out there with you, but you're in your own little nook of the wilderness. You're not making contact with humans. And you basically meditate and pray for a vision. You're really seeking that transformative space that I'm talking about. But one of the things about the vision quest is, which is a very challenging but very powerful experience if you ever get the chance to do one. And I suggest doing it with a group of people that there's protection around. And if there's an emergency, you know that there's people on the other side of the camp that you can contact. You know, it's not something that I would advise go doing by yourself. But one of the things that often the guides will say when you come out of your quest and tell your story, be careful who you share this with. Because every time you share this with someone who's going to discount it and not understand it, it loses a little bit of its power. It's just like Christ said, do not cast your pearls to swine, because when you do that, you're actually disempowering yourself. So I am very selective with who I share sacred experiences with, especially when I'm still trying to figure out the meaning of them for myself. So I think that's such an powerful and important thing to remember. Share it, but it is important to share it with people who will listen and who will understand, and people who will really empower you and say, wow, I can't believe you had that experience, man. You're really accessing your potential. Like, go get it, get after it. Just like Jocko says, get after it, keep at it. So we need that social encouragement, but we got to be selective about who we share with. And I've come up against that on this YouTube channel sometimes, right? Like I'll share something and then some people will, shit all over it, and other people will be very supportive. But one of the things that helps me do is just become more and more confident and solidified in my own experience and not rely on the outside world as much. That's my learning edge that I have to work with. It's easy to give other people our power. That's something that I've struggled with. I give you the power over how I feel about myself. And that's another thing about personal transformation. It's really extremely independent and individual. It's individuation. If I give you the power to tell me how I'm doing, then I become weak. So it's this, again, another razor's edge example. I need to be open and flexible to have feedback. If somebody comes up to me and says, Ryan, you need to work on this, if it's somebody that I respect, I need to take that feedback seriously, take it in consideration. But where's the be all end all? Where does the buck stop? It stops with me. Do I feel okay with how I am? Who's really the authority on how I'm doing in my life? It's so easy to give it over to you guys. You guys think I'm doing okay? Like a dog. Thanks guys. Or, shaming me. Oh man, I didn't do a good job. So that's a learning edge. But when I really lean into that true self, that image of the tree, that potential self, and I really go there, that part of myself is super strong. And it's not afraid to tell me when I screwed something up. It's not afraid to say, hey, you need to go make an apology. And it's also not afraid to say, Screw what they're thinking. You're doing fine. So there's that deeper sense of connectivity that I can rely on in order to navigate my way through life. We've got a couple comments here. Johan says, don't ask, don't tell. Rico Star says, I absolutely love your fire. Keep at it. And selective feedback. Yeah, selective feedback. It's another thing I've been trying to work on with this channel. A lot of you guys have awesome feedback. And some people just trying to cause trouble. So there's that learning how to take it in, what to take and what to leave behind. That'll always be something to continue to work on. So what I'm trying to do, just to give a little bit more context here, is if we invert the process of setting goals and accomplishing things in life, and we actually elevate being to a more valuable state, I think we'd be surprised how much it affects our doing. Another example, okay? Like I said, we could set the goal to go to the gym and then keep it surface because we want to feel better, we want to look better. Or we could set the goal of, I want to feel a sense of strength, not just physically, but like metaphorically. I want to feel energetically. I want to feel solidified. I want to feel fortified. I want to feel competitive. I want to feel agile. These are all states of consciousness. These are not just simple accomplishments that we can go do. And if we elevate that to the level of connecting to that energy form or that image of whatever that potential self is that feels that way, going to the gym is going to happen naturally. So it doesn't matter what time of day it is or if it's on my calendar or not. That's important too. Don't get me wrong. But that sense of energy is going to drive my internal compass towards the right thing. So if you look at the brain as a computer with a GPS system, this isn't a metaphor I've made up. This has been clarified by scientists and writers. If the brain is a GPS system, and I've programmed, I want you to go to that island, okay? And then all of a sudden one day I decide, I don't want to go to that island. I'm going to turn around. And I turn around. But then all of a sudden I stop steering because I think that the system realized where I wanted to go. But I never reprogrammed the GPS. So it turns around, and next time I open my eyes, I'm like, hey, why are we turned this way again? I told you I wanted to go to the gym. But we haven't been to the gym in 2 weeks. You didn't reprogram your brain. You didn't go down deep enough to reprogram the image of what you want in your life. You didn't fulfill that potential energy field. And so there's a real value in changing it all the way down to the structure of being. That's what I'm working on right now. And that actually, the reason I keep bringing up the gym is because that's what happened for me. I just go work out. I don't have a schedule. I work out every day. And I do it when I want to do it, when I have time, whether it's on a lunch break or before work, after I work, before I do schoolwork, after I do schoolwork. It just happens. It's not limited to 9 to 10 a.m. There's nothing wrong with that routine of 9 to 10 a.m. Some people need that. So I'm not discounting that. Everybody's different. I'm just telling you what's worked for me. I'm going to read a couple more comments and then I got to go. Actually, Griswold Grimm says, you think that the part of you is the same one that JPP had tell him stop saying things that make you weak. Is that Socrates' daemon? Yeah. Yep. That's right. I think that's absolutely right. Every time I listen to someone talking about spirituality and higher consciousness and dimensions, etc., I can't help but think it's pseudo-intellectual stuff. It's the opposite of Peterson's work. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's important that we ground things in reality in ways that we can function, right? So here's one way to think about that. The value of an idea is only as powerful as the ability to implement it. So if somebody's talking about and this is a pragmatist viewpoint, so you've got me nailed if that's what you're thinking. But if you can take that idea and you can live it out, that's wisdom. So Muhammad, I would just, one thing to think about is, instead of discounting the whole realm of consciousness and dimensions, which I'm not saying you're doing, but think about it this way. What's something I can live, and what's something that would just continue to keep me in a cyclical thought loop? Because you can live the image, you can do those exercises and see how it works, but there's certain ideas that I find I can't, there's nothing I can do. Andrew says, read Prometheus Rising for a great technique on programming the brain, or programming. Perfect. Prometheus Rising. That's a great one. It's a great comment. Andrew's recommended that several times, so let's get on it, everybody. Rico Star, I love working out with music. For me, it's a feeling thing. Also, Peterson talks about the importance of beauty and accessing the divine too. So yeah, he does talk about beauty and accessing the divine. I don't think Muhammad was saying that he wasn't. I think he was just saying that it's important to stay grounded. At least that's the way I interpreted it. Andrew Jokum, I will read that book. Nice to see you. That's from Johan or Johan. I don't know which one it is. Sorry. Gloff, I still need to read that. All right, everybody. I got to go. I have an appointment in 30 minutes, and I have to, head over there. So thank you, everyone, so much for tuning in to Sorting Myself Out. Thank you, Andrew, for moderating. Thank you all for your wonderful and beautiful contributions and comments, and for giving me the chance to present some of my ideas. This is a work in progress. This is not set in stone. I'm learning. I'm growing. I'm playing with ideas. So I'm open to growing and changing things as they go along. Thank you so much. See you later.